Good morning. I was going to start turning around, looking at myself, think, oh, I need to go and clean my teeth and brush myself up so I didn't look so grrr. And then I thought, well, actually, no. Kind of this video today is kind of like about the whole thing about real people versus fake avatars. So I have noticed this thing guy pop up on my page called Shane David Murray, aka Sly God, and he was doing some very good information at least first glance. I hadn't really had a chance to really bend my head around it. And then someone sent me a screenshot showing that actually his original Facebook page had basically the bottom of it had Vinny Eastwood on and Vinny Eastwood's little signature. So I went, that's a bit strange, and did a little company search files and looked around, and there was a company down there which is listed under Shane David Murray's space. So I put it out there along with basically linking him into his page, because at this stage he'd been liking my page and following it, and along the way I've been still thinking some of this content was quite interesting because it's very similar to some of the stuff that I had previously done and was always trying to steer Vinny Eastwood towards, which was less of the sensational Illuminati, more of this like things about things that people actually matter. And this was very much in that kind of style, looking at water and privatisation of energy and AI data centres and all that kind of stuff. And the only thing that kind of got my sort of right was like what he wasn't mentioning. Like he wasn't mentioning Rocket Lab, he wasn't mentioning Israel, he wasn't mentioning the X Party, he wasn't mentioning New Zealand First, but he's bashing National, bashing Greens, bashing Labor, and dealing with these issues, and basically saying, oh, no, they're terrible, vote for a little party, which is kind of music to the ears of people like ACT and so on, because those votes that we vote for those little parties take them away from the major parties, which increase their chance New Zealand First and ACT getting in. So they're playing the game. It's not so much about how many votes you win, but how many votes you actually lose. So I thought, okay, that's a bit strange. And he came back and all like growling at me, like, oh, you can't share my content. I'm going, well, your content's all AI generated anyway, so I can share it because it's none of it's actually your material. You're just asking a question and using the links and then patching it down and then making it sound like you're writing all these incredible articles when you're just sort of filling in the paragraph sentences. But that kind of made me think the way he responded, and I'm no shell, which is kind of almost a Vinny colloquialism. I went, what's going on here? So I had another look, and again found a lot smaller pages where there's definitely like a social footprint. Shane Murray and Vinny Eastwood footprints are connecting all the time to each other. And then, spoke to somebody from Finstone and said, oh, I think he might be a real guy. I knew somebody that knew it. And this is all like, it was, nobody could pin down and say, I definitely know this guy. 100%. So anyway, we continued. Just sorry, a little bit technical there. We continued to look a little bit deeper, and this was all that he was also said that he was in the Royal New Zealand Artillery, and that's when it started to get weird, because I started looking at some of these other avatars, and one of them was Koa Crown, and they also have these, and even people like Kelvin Alps, just we're going to get there in a second, all have these sort of military careers where they're kind of claiming stolen value. Well, like, it appears that way. Maybe he's really legitimate. Maybe he was in the Royal New Zealand Artillery. But when again we sort of point out the question straight. Well, what's your service number? What unit did you work with? What commander? None of these guys can actually offer this up, and it all just seems very like they're trying to make themselves out to be something they're actually not. Which again goes back to like when you see me, you see I am what I am. And again, I started running these things through a few computer filters and started finding that there was sort of half a dozen of these different personalities that all had all AI, all avatars, and I'm just going to hold that. G'day.
Hey.
I'll be with you in 2 minutes.
Sorry, I don't want to interrupt.
Yeah. So anyway, that was my basic point today. Was just this little basic question of we're very interested in who actually the Shane Murray is. Again, he said he did a lot of like Tikanga local politics, but I haven't actually seen anybody who can case a site example or a Pacific court or a Pacific judge. So if anyone does know this information, we'd really like to know, because I'd really like to get to know to the question about who actually these particular characters actually are. The one thing this question boils down to, if they are why, what's going on, and we see that Kelvin Alps is very, very keen at the moment. He's very keen to take control of Loyal, which is basically, again, using the Libertarian Party's manifesto word for word. And again, we've talked about Kelvin Alps' links back to things like the Phoenix Foundation of the 1970s, with the Libertarian parties and this destabilisation program that the Libertarians were running in places like Vanuatu and Tonga in the 1970s and early 80s, linking to people like Adon Khashoggi, that was linked into the attempt to coups in Fiji in 2000, and now we see this sort of thing sort of turned up in places like Prospera, with Honduras dictator linked into the Pax Americana, Argentina with the Liberty Cities, Greenland, Peter Thiel and the PayPal Mafia. So the question is, we're saying, well, I think a lot of these guys are linked to the Atlas network, but the key is why? And the short version is Alp needs 83,000, he needs 500 members to get they've applied for the election funding for $83,000, which they've been given, but to actually get it given, and they've been, yeah, you can have it if you can show us you've got 500 members. He's got to get 500 members. He doesn't even have to be actually registered, but that's basically what I think a lot of this chases on from people like Alp for themselves personally. Indirectly, I think it's the Atlas network going, hey, stirring up these small parties. They all sort of cross each other out, but what they ultimately do is they steal votes away from parties like Labour National and gives a chance for parties like ACT and New Zealand First, which are very controlled or very influenced by the Atlas network to get a stronger grip. And this is all coming at the same time when you're seeing basically Shane Jones wants these super councils put out there, and these super councils make it again easier for organisations like the Atlas Network to control local politics and basically get what they want. And we're seeing the same thing happen in overseas in Australia, with again very strong connections between corruption and organised crime. $15 billion of the CFMU's money going into local politics, and this is partly what's fueling this tsunami of drugs, which people like Michael Field have been again looking at this intersection between politics and organised crime in a Substack. So that's it, and that's my little thought, and I'll just put that in there about. We'd like to know whether Shane David Murray is a real person, and we'd like to track down some of these avatars, because we think a lot of them are just, they've been fabricated and they've been there to basically serve the Atlas octopus.